In this episode, the focus is not on learning more facts right away, but on building a plan that makes learning possible when your week gets messy, your energy is uneven, and your calendar refuses to cooperate. A lot of people fail certifications not because they are incapable, but because they create a study plan designed for a fictional version of themselves who always has time, always feels motivated, and never gets interrupted. The goal is to build an 8-week rhythm you can follow with your actual life, using short, repeatable routines that work on tired days and still add up to real progress. We will treat the Certified Information Privacy Manager, CIPM, exam as a project with a start date, a finish line, and checkpoints that keep you honest without crushing you. By the end, you should have a spoken plan you can repeat to yourself, week by week, that feels realistic, measurable, and forgiving in the right places. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first idea to lock in is that a plan survives real life when it is built around behavior, not around optimism. Behavior is what you do even when you do not feel like it, and studying has to become a small, automatic habit rather than a heroic event. That means you should think in terms of minimums and extras, where the minimum is the small daily action you can almost always do, and the extras are what you do when you have more time or energy. The minimum might be a short audio review, plus a few recall prompts, while the extras might include deeper reading or more practice questions. The secret is that the minimum is not a consolation prize, because consistency is what makes memory stick and keeps you from restarting every Monday. If you only study when conditions are perfect, you will spend the entire 8 weeks restarting instead of progressing. Your plan should assume disruptions are normal and should still work when you miss a day. Before you decide what to do in each week, you need a simple model of how learning works, because the plan should match how your brain actually retains information. Memory strengthens through repeated retrieval, not repeated exposure, which means you need to practice pulling ideas out of your head, not just hearing them again. This is why a plan built entirely around passive listening tends to feel productive but produces weak recall under exam pressure. Audio is powerful when you treat it as a trigger for retrieval, like pausing and asking yourself to restate the idea in your own words, or predicting what comes next before you hear it. Over 8 weeks, you want a repeating loop of learn, recall, check, and revisit, because that loop turns fragile recognition into durable understanding. When people say they forgot everything on exam day, what they usually mean is that they recognize concepts but could not retrieve them cleanly. Your plan needs retrieval built into it from week 1. Now let's set the frame of the 8-week timeline so it feels like a series of manageable sprints rather than one long, blurry marathon. Weeks 1 and 2 are for building foundations and vocabulary, because beginners need a shared language before program concepts make sense. Weeks 3 and 4 are for building the life cycle picture, where you connect strategy, governance, and operations into one continuous story. Weeks 5 and 6 are for strengthening decision-making, where you practice choosing the best next step and explaining why, because that is how the exam tests you. Week 7 is for targeted repair work, where you hunt your weakest topics and fix them without expanding into new material. Week 8 is for consolidation and calm, where you reduce anxiety by making your routine predictable and sharpening recall rather than cramming new ideas. That sequence works because it matches how confidence grows, from understanding words to understanding relationships, to making good choices quickly. It also gives you permission to not be perfect early, because the plan expects improvement over time. To make this survive real life, you need to decide when studying will happen, not just how much studying you hope to do. The most reliable approach for busy lives is to attach studying to an existing daily routine, like a commute, a walk, a consistent morning task, or a predictable evening window. The reason this works is that your schedule already has anchors, and you are borrowing their stability instead of trying to create stability from scratch. You also want to build your study time in small blocks, because small blocks are easier to protect and easier to restart after interruptions. If you tell yourself you will do a long session every weekend, you are betting your progress on the most fragile part of your week. If you tell yourself you will do short sessions most days, you are spreading the risk and making your plan more resilient. A plan that survives is not the one that looks impressive on paper. It is the one you can restart without drama after a bad day. A helpful way to speak your plan out loud is to use a simple daily script that does not change much, because decisions create friction and friction kills consistency. Your daily script should include a brief review of something you already covered, a small dose of new material, and a short retrieval check. The review comes first because it warms up your brain and strengthens older memories, which reduces the feeling that everything is slipping away. The new material comes second because you are now focused and ready to absorb, even if the time is short. The retrieval check comes last because it forces you to actively pull key ideas back out, and that is what makes the learning durable. On days when life is heavy, you still do the review and retrieval check, and you let the new material go, because the minimum keeps you moving. On days when life is generous, you add more new material and more practice, but you still keep the same basic structure so it stays automatic. Weekly structure matters just as much as daily structure, because weeks are where you measure progress and adjust without panic. At the start of each week, you should set a small set of targets that are specific enough to be checkable, but not so rigid that one disruption ruins everything. Think of targets like completing a certain chunk of content, reviewing the previous week's material, and doing a set of practice items that reveal your weak spots. Then, in the middle of the week, you do a quick self-check to see if you are on track, and if not, you adjust by reducing the extras rather than abandoning the week. At the end of the week, you do a short recap where you restate what you learned and you note what still feels fuzzy. That end-of-week recap is not a punishment. It is a map for the next week's repair work. This is how you keep the plan alive, because you are responding to reality instead of judging yourself for it. Weeks 1 and 2 should focus on building confidence with the language of privacy program management, because beginners often struggle not because ideas are too hard, but because the terms all blur together. During these weeks, you want to get comfortable with concepts like privacy program lifecycle stages, governance, roles, accountability, and measurement. You also want to build a mental dictionary where each important term has a plain meaning and a place in the overall story. If you hear a term and cannot explain it simply, that term becomes a friction point later when questions become more scenario-like. Your practice during these weeks should be mostly about definitions and connections, like explaining what a program charter does and how it differs from a policy, or why stakeholder alignment matters for making privacy work day to day. Keep your retrieval checks short and frequent, and treat confusion as normal. These weeks are about building a foundation that makes later studying faster, not about trying to master everything immediately. Weeks 3 and 4 are where you start thinking like a program manager rather than a note collector, and that shift is what makes the CIPM exam feel manageable. Your goal is to be able to tell the story of a privacy program from strategy to operations in a way that sounds logical and repeatable. Strategy is about purpose and direction, governance is about decision rights and accountability, and operations is about what actually happens when data is processed and decisions must be executed. When you study, you should practice identifying which part of the story a topic belongs to, because exam questions often test whether you can match the right action to the right stage. If you find yourself memorizing isolated facts, pull back and ask how that fact influences a decision or a program artifact. A good weekly routine here includes short summaries where you restate the life cycle flow in your own words and explain how changes in business activity create new privacy work. The point is to build a clear mental map that you can navigate quickly later. Weeks 5 and 6 are where your plan becomes more exam-shaped, because now you have enough foundation to practice decision-making in a realistic way. This is when practice questions and scenario-style prompts become more valuable, not because you are hunting for tricks, but because you are training your brain to choose and move on. Each time you answer a question, you should practice a quick internal explanation for why the right answer fits the situation and why the other answers do not. That explanation is the learning, because it forces you to connect the concept to the program reality. You also want to practice recognizing what the question is asking, such as best next step, primary purpose, or most appropriate owner of a task. Those are patterns, and patterns are easier to learn than random details. During these weeks, keep your daily script stable, but allocate a larger portion of time to retrieval and checking because your goal is speed plus accuracy. If you only absorb content without testing recall, you will feel knowledgeable but still struggle under time pressure. Week 7 is your repair week, and it exists because every real plan needs space to fix what did not stick the first time. This week should feel focused rather than frantic, and the key is to use evidence from your practice to choose what to repair. Evidence means the topics you consistently miss, the terms you cannot explain plainly, and the scenarios where you choose the wrong owner or wrong stage of the life cycle. The risk in a repair week is that people treat it like a chance to explore new content, and that usually backfires because it adds cognitive load without strengthening weak areas. Instead, you revisit the confusing areas and rebuild them from basics, using simpler explanations and more retrieval. You also rerun practice questions on those topics to confirm the repair actually worked, because confidence without verification is fragile. If life has disrupted earlier weeks, this is also where you do selective catch-up, but only on the most important pieces, because trying to catch up on everything often leads to burnout. Repair week should make you feel more stable, not more overwhelmed. Week 8 is your consolidation week, and consolidation is the opposite of cramming. Cramming is a desperate attempt to force new facts into short-term memory, while consolidation is a methodical strengthening of what you already know so it comes out cleanly under stress. In this week, you want your routine to feel predictable, because predictability reduces anxiety and helps your brain perform. You focus on reviewing high-yield concepts, tightening definitions, and practicing quick decision-making with short prompts. You also reduce major changes to your schedule, because the goal is to arrive at test day with stable sleep, stable focus, and a calm mind. If you have been doing retrieval all along, week 8 is not terrifying, it is a polishing phase. This is also the week where you review testing policies and logistics again, so you do not lose mental energy to avoidable surprises. Your plan should end with you feeling ready, not with you feeling like you just survived a storm. Now let's talk about the part that most plans ignore, which is what you do when you miss time. Because missing time is not a rare event, it is a guarantee. When you miss a day, the worst thing you can do is punish yourself with an unrealistic makeup session, because that turns your plan into a source of guilt and makes you want to avoid it. A better approach is to build a built-in buffer, where each week has at least one lighter day that can absorb a missed session without creating a backlog. If you miss more than that, you switch into triage mode, where you keep the minimum daily habit and temporarily reduce the extras until you are stable again. The plan survives because the minimum keeps you connected to the material, which prevents the feeling of starting over. Another survival tactic is to separate studying into portable and non-portable formats, so on chaotic days you can still do something small without needing perfect conditions. The overall goal is to keep the chain unbroken as often as possible, because long gaps are what cause most of the forgetting and most of the discouragement. To make your plan spoken and usable, you should be able to describe it to yourself in a few sentences without needing to look at anything. You might say that you study most days in short blocks. You start with quick review, you add a little new learning, and you end with retrieval, and then each week you check progress and adjust. You might say that weeks 1 and 2 are foundations, weeks 3 and 4 are the life cycle map, weeks 5 and 6 are decision practice, week 7 is repair, and week 8 is consolidation. When a plan is speakable, it is easier to follow because it lives in your head instead of on a page you forget to open. Speakability also makes it easier to restart after interruptions, because you do not need to replan, you just resume the next small action. This is why complicated schedules fail, because they require constant management, and constant management is fragile under stress. A spoken plan is a durable plan because it is simple enough to remember and flexible enough to handle reality. One last ingredient is how you measure progress without turning your study life into a stressful scoreboard. A good measure is whether you can explain core concepts in plain language and whether your practice answers are becoming faster and more consistent. Another good measure is whether you can correctly identify the stage of the privacy program lifecycle that a question is describing and choose an action that fits that stage. You can also measure whether your weak topics are shrinking, meaning the same gaps do not keep showing up week after week. The wrong measure is how long you studied on a single day, because long sessions can be inefficient and can even create false confidence. The right measure is whether your recall is improving and whether you can make program-shaped decisions more reliably. If you track anything, track patterns of mistakes, because patterns tell you what to repair. That kind of measurement feels practical rather than punishing, and it helps your plan evolve rather than collapse. By the time you finish these 8 weeks, you want to feel like you have been training a system, not chasing motivation, because systems are what survive in the real world. You built a minimum daily habit that keeps you connected, and you used extra time when it appeared without depending on it. You learned how memory works, so you prioritized retrieval over passive exposure, and you designed weeks that progressively move from vocabulary to life cycle understanding to decision-making. You planned for missed time without drama, and you created buffers so one bad day does not become a bad month. Most importantly, you made your plan speakable, so you can carry it with you and restart it whenever life pushes you off track. When you approach CIPM preparation this way, studying stops being a fragile promise and becomes a steady routine, and that steadiness is what turns effort into passing performance.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.